The last evacuation shuttle had left 3 days ago. Cole watched it disappear into the orange sky from behind a broken wall, knowing she would never catch it. The engines roared and faded, and then there was nothing but silence and smoke. She was alone now. Prime was a jungle world on the edge of Coalition space. It had been beautiful once. Scientists had come here to study the strange plants and animals. Diplomats had built stations to meet with alien species. Soldiers had protected them all. But then the war came, and everything changed. The Dominion attacked without warning. They were in species, tall and thin with black shells and red eyes. They moved in swarms. They thought in swarms, and they killed in swarms. Their drones filled the sky like angry clouds, raining fire on everything below. Was a sergeant in the Coalition ground forces. She was 27 years old with short brown hair and tired eyes. A thin scar ran along her jawline from a training accident years ago. She was not tall. She was not particularly strong. But she was smart, and she was stubborn, and right now those two things were keeping her alive. Her squad was gone. Private Danny had died in the first attack, caught in the open when the drones came. She still remembered his face, young and scared, looking up at the sky as the fire fell. Corporal Bate had made it to an escape pod. Maybe she got out. Maybe she did not. Lieutenant Greg Palmer had ordered everyone to fall back to secondary extraction, but secondary extraction was 40 kilometers away through jungle filled with enemies. Had tried to reach it. She really had. But they were everywhere, and her leg was injured, and the jungle was thick and dark and full of things that wanted to kill her. So she had stopped. She had found shelter in the ruins of a research station and decided to wait. Wait for what she did not know. Rescue was not coming. The Coalition had already declared Prime a lost cause. The planet was too deep in territory now. Sending ships would be suicide. She understood that. She accepted that, but she was not ready to die, not yet. The research station had been abandoned in a hurry. Found supplies scattered everywhere. Food in the storage rooms, water in the tanks, weapons in the armory. Not much, but enough to survive for a while. She gathered what she could and made a small camp in the basement, away from the windows, away from the drones. She checked her equipment carefully. 2 magazines for her pulse rifle, 1 combat knife, 3 ration bars, a canteen half full of water, a first aid kit with bandages and painkillers, a small toolkit she had grabbed from a workbench. It was not much. It would have to be enough. The nights on Prime were long and cold. The planet had 2 moons that hung in the sky like pale eyes, watching everything below, sat in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of explosions and drone engines. They were still hunting. They were always hunting. She tried the communications equipment one more time, even though she knew it was pointless. Static filled her ears. The satellites were down. The relay stations were destroyed. No one could hear her, and she could hear no one. She was truly alone. On the second day, she explored the ruins more carefully. The research station had been studying the local wildlife before the attack. She found data pads filled with notes about plants and animals. She found cages that had held specimens, now empty and broken. She found bodies too, scientists who had not made it to the shuttles. She buried them as best she could. It seemed like the right thing to do. The jungle around the station was dense and green, filled with strange sounds and stranger shadows. Did not go far. She set up a perimeter with motion sensors she found in the security room. She rigged alarms using spare parts and wire. If anything came close, she would know. On the third day, the drones flew directly overhead. Hid in the basement, holding her breath, listening to the mechanical hum of their engines. They passed without stopping. They had not found her yet, but they would keep looking. They always kept looking. She was running low on water. The tanks in the station were almost empty, and the nearest stream was 200 meters away through open ground. She would have to risk it eventually, but not yet, not while the drones were so close. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of red and purple, heard something strange. It was not the sound of drones. It was not the sound of explosions. It was small and weak and desperate. A whimper. She froze her hand on her rifle. The sound came again from somewhere nearby. It was an animal sound, she realized. Something in pain, something afraid. Every survival instinct told her to ignore it. She had enough problems without adding more. She needed to stay hidden, stay quiet, stay alive. Whatever was making that sound was not her concern. But the whimper came again, and something in her chest tightened. Had grown up on a farm in Kansas. Her family had raised dogs and horses and chickens. She remembered finding a litter of puppies once, abandoned in a ditch by the road. They had been cold and hungry and scared. Her mother had said they could not keep them, that they did not have the resources, but had begged and pleaded, and in the end they had taken the puppies home and nursed them back to health. She was not on Earth anymore. She was not on a farm. She was on an alien planet in the middle of a war, surrounded by enemies who wanted her dead. But that sound, that small, desperate sound, pulled at something deep inside her. Against every rational thought in her mind, grabbed her rifle and followed the whimper into the darkness. The sound led her through the ruins, past collapsed walls and shattered equipment, to a place where a section of the station had fallen into the ground. There was a hole there, dark and deep, leading down into some kind of underground space. The whimper was coming from below. Activated the light on her rifle and pointed it down. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing broken metal and chunks of concrete. And there, huddled together at the bottom of the hole, were three small creatures staring up at her with wide, frightened eyes. She did not recognize them at first. They were about the size of dogs, with 6 legs and scales that should have glowed with color but instead looked dull and gray. Their ribs showed through their skin. Their eyes were huge and intelligent. Then she remembered the research notes she had found. The scientists had been studying the apex predator of Prime, the most dangerous creature on the planet. The Ravager. And these were its cubs, stared down at the cubs for a long moment. Her rifle was steady in her hands, the light shining directly on them. They did not move. They did not attack. They just looked at her with those big, frightened eyes and whimpered. She had read about Ravagers in the research notes. The scientists had described them in great detail. Adults stood 3 meters tall at the shoulder. They had 6 powerful limbs that could tear through metal. Their jaws could crush starship hull plating. Their scales glowed with bioluminescent colors when they were healthy, blues and greens and purples that made them look almost beautiful. The Coalition had classified them as Category 7 hostile fauna. That was the highest danger rating possible. The official protocol was simple: shoot on sight. No exceptions. No hesitation. A single adult Ravager had once wiped out an entire scouting battalion. These creatures were not pets. They were not friends. They were killers. But these were not adults. Looked at the 3 small forms huddled together in the darkness. Their scales were dull and gray, not glowing at all. Their bodies were thin and weak. She could count their ribs through their skin. They had not eaten in days, maybe longer. She swept her light around the underground space, searching for threats. That was when she saw the mother. The adult Ravager lay 20 meters away, half buried under rubble. She was massive, easily 3 times the size of a horse, with scales that might have once been beautiful but were now dark and lifeless. A piece of the research station had collapsed on top of her. She was dead. Understood immediately. When the orbital strikes had hit the station, part of the building had fallen into this den. The mother had been killed by the debris. The cubs had been trapped down here ever since, too young to climb out, too weak to hunt, too small to survive on their own. They were starving to death. The smart thing to do was obvious: walk away. These creatures would grow up to be monsters. Even if she helped them now, they would eventually become dangerous. Every tactical manual, every training session, every survival instinct told her the same thing: leave them or kill them. Either way, do not get involved. Lowered her rifle. She thought about the puppies she had found in that ditch back home. She thought about how cold and scared they had been. She thought about how her mother had said they could not keep them, and how had begged and pleaded until they gave in. Those puppies had grown up to be good dogs, loyal dogs. They had protected the farm for years. These were not puppies. They were alien predators. They could kill her. They probably would kill her eventually. But right now they were just bobbies, hungry, scared, alone, and she could not walk away from that. Found a way down into the den. It was not easy. She had to climb carefully over broken metal and loose concrete. Her injured leg ached with every step, but she made it to the bottom, her rifle ready, her eyes on the cubs. They watched her approach. The largest one stepped forward slightly, putting itself between her and the other two. It was trying to protect them. Even starving and weak, it was trying to be brave. Stopped a few meters away. She moved slowly and deliberately, keeping her body language calm and non-threatening. She had worked with animals before. She knew that sudden movements caused fear, and fear caused attacks. She reached into her pack and pulled out one of her 3 ration bars. It was not much. It was her food, her survival supplies. But she broke it into small pieces and placed them on the ground in front of her. Then she stepped back and waited. The cubs stared at the food. They stared at her. The largest one sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the smallest cub, the weakest one, crept forward on shaky legs. It was so thin that could see every bone in its body. It reached the food and sniffed it carefully. Then it picked up a piece and ate it. The other 2 cubs watched. When the smallest one did not die or get attacked, they came forward too. Soon all 3 were eating, devouring the pieces of ration bar like they had not eaten in weeks, because they probably had not. Smiled. It was a small thing, feeding 3 starving animals. It would not change the war. It would not save her from it would not get her off this planet, but it felt right. It felt human. She sat down on a piece of rubble, keeping her distance, watching the cubs eat. When they finished, they looked at her again. The fear in their eyes had faded slightly. Now there was something else: curiosity, interest. The largest cub took a step toward her. Then another. It moved slowly, carefully, just like she had moved. It was testing her, trying to figure out if she was safe. Held very still, she let the cub approach. It came close enough to sniff her boot, then her hand. Its nose was cold and wet, like a dog's nose. She could feel the warmth of its breath on her skin. Then it did something that surprised her. It pressed its head against her palm, just for a moment, before stepping back to rejoin the others. Felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. There was no time for emotion. There was too much to do. She looked around the den, assessing the situation. The cubs could not stay here. The space was unstable. More rubble could fall at any time, but they were too weak to travel far. She needed to find a safe place for them, somewhere she could protect them, somewhere she could feed them until they were strong enough to survive on their own. The research station above was ruined, but there were still intact sections. The basement where she had made her camp was solid and secure. It had walls and a roof and only one entrance. She could bring the cubs there. She could protect them. It was a crazy idea, she knew that. She was supposed to be hiding from not adopting alien predators, but she had already made her choice. She had already shared her food. She was already involved. Stood up and looked at the cubs. They looked back at her, waiting. She would need more supplies, more food, more water. She would need to set up better defenses. The drones were still out there, searching for survivors. If they found her, they would kill her and the cubs both. But first, she needed to get these animals out of this hole. Reached into her pack and pulled out another ration bar. She held it up so the cubs could see it. Then she started climbing toward the surface, moving slowly, looking back often. The cubs followed her. One by one, they climbed up out of the den, following the scent of food and the strange two-legged creature who had given it to them. Behind them, the body of their mother lay still and silent in the darkness. Above them, somewhere in the sky, drones continued their endless patrol. And Cole, alone on an alien world, began the long walk back to her shelter, with 3 hungry predators trailing behind her. Commander of the Galactic Coalition Survey Corps was not supposed to be here. His ship, the reconnaissance cruiser Steadfast Observer, had received orders to catalog the destruction of Prime from orbit. The planet was lost. The Dominion had won this battle. All the Coalition could do now was record what had happened and move on. Was a member of the species. His people were tall and gray-skinned, with long fingers and large black eyes. They were known throughout the galaxy for their careful record-keeping and their emotional control. I did not get excited. I did not get scared. I observed, recorded, and reported. That was their purpose. He had been scanning the northern sector of the planet when his sensors detected something unexpected. A single human life sign, alone in the ruins of a research station. This should not have been possible. All Coalition personnel had been evacuated. Anyone left behind should have been dead by now. Curiosity was not supposed to be a trait, but felt it anyway. He dispatched a small surveillance drone, a simple unit designed for observation rather than combat. It descended through the atmosphere, dodging patrols, and made its way to the coordinates where the life sign had appeared. What it transmitted back made freeze at his command console. The human was a female, small and tired-looking, with short brown hair and a scar on her jaw. She was sitting in the open, her back against a collapsed wall, surrounded by 3 young ravagers. The creatures were pressed against her sides, their heads resting on her legs. She was feeding them something from her pack while speaking to them in soft, gentle tones. Checked his sensors twice. He checked them 3 times. The reading was accurate. A human was sitting in the open with Category 7 predators and she was not being attacked. She was caring for them. Then he noticed what was happening behind her. The sky was burning. Attack drones were falling from the air, exploding into fragments before they could reach her position. One after another, they dropped from the clouds in flames, crashing into the jungle around the station. The human had set up some kind of defense system, a network of automated weapons cobbled together from salvaged Coalition technology. The system was intercepting incoming threats with brutal efficiency. Watched another drone get torn apart by pulse fire, then another, then another. The human did not even flinch. She simply continued feeding the cubs at her side, murmuring words that the drone's audio sensors could barely pick up. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. She looked like someone who had accepted her situation completely. Ran the numbers in his head. The human had been alone on this planet for at least 4 days. She was outnumbered and trapped. She had no hope of rescue. By all logical calculations, she should have been trying to escape or hiding or fighting for her own survival. Instead, she was protecting baby animals. He watched the footage for over an hour. The sun moved across the sky. The drones kept coming. The human kept shooting them down, and the cubs stayed close to her, pressing against her body, trusting her completely. At one point, the largest cub lifted its head and made a soft sound. The human looked down at it and smiled. She reached out and scratched behind what might have been its ears. The cub's scales, which had been dull and gray, began to pulse with faint color. Had never seen anything like it. He expanded his surveillance range, trying to understand the full scope of what he was witnessing. The human had transformed the ruins of the research station into a fortress. Motion sensors lined the perimeter. Automated turrets covered every approach. She had used scrap metal and broken equipment to build barriers and obstacles that would slow any ground assault. But none of it was designed to help her escape. None of it was positioned to protect a retreat. Every defensive measure was aimed at keeping the cubs safe. She had built a shelter for them, a protected space in the basement of the station where they could sleep and eat and grow. She was not fighting for herself, she was fighting for them. Recorded everything. He documented the defensive positions, the automated weapons, the improvised technology. He noted the way the cubs responded to the human, the trust they showed, the way their scales slowly regained color as they ate and rested. He captured images of the burning drones falling from the sky, of the human's calm face as she worked, of the small moments of tenderness between a soldier and the predators she had chosen to protect. When his recording was complete, he sat in silence for a long time. They were logical creatures. They believed in efficiency and purpose. Every action should serve a goal. Every resource should be used wisely. Wasting food on animals that would eventually become dangerous was irrational. Risking your life to protect creatures that served no strategic purpose was foolish. But could not stop thinking about the way the human had smiled at the cub. The way she had spoken softly even though no one could hear. The way she had built an entire fortress not for herself, but for 3 small lives that most people would have abandoned. He thought about his own species. They did not form attachments easily. They did not sacrifice themselves for others without reason. They calculated costs and benefits and made rational decisions. That was their strength. But watching this human, wondered if it was also their weakness. He made his decision. Coalition Command would not approve. His orders were clear. Observe and report. Do not interfere. Prime was a lost cause. Sending ships would be suicide. He knew all of this. But he also knew that he could not watch this human die. Opened a secure channel to Coalition headquarters. He attached his footage and prepared a detailed report. He knew that what he was about to request would be. He knew that he was risking his career. But he also knew that some things were more important than orders. He began his transmission with simple words that carried more weight than he expected. Command, this is Reconnaissance Cruiser Steadfast Observer. I have found a survivor on Prime. I am requesting immediate extraction. He paused, looking at the image of the human on his screen. She was asleep now, slumped against the wall, with 3 Ravager cubs curled around her like a living blanket. Her face was peaceful. Added one more line to his message. You need to see this. Then he sent the transmission and waited for a response that might never come. The footage played on the main screen of Coalition Command for the 3rd time. Admiral Morin watched it with all 4 of her eyes narrowed in concentration. Around her, representatives from a dozen different species sat in silence, trying to understand what they were seeing. The human female was feeding the cubs again. Behind her, another drone exploded in a ball of fire. She did not even turn to look at it. She just kept breaking small pieces of food and offering them to the 3 young Ravagers pressed against her body. Admiral was a veteran of 30 campaigns. She had seen bravery before. She had seen soldiers sacrifice themselves for their units, for their ships, for their people. But she had never seen anything quite like this. A delegate spoke first. His name was, and his chitinous body clicked with agitation as he watched the footage. They were an insect-like species themselves, though they had been enemies of for centuries. They believed in logic, efficiency, and the cold calculations of survival. This is madness, said. The human expends resources protecting creatures that could kill her. She sacrifices her own sustenance for animals that serve no strategic purpose. She builds defenses not to escape, but to shelter predators that every tactical manual classifies as hostile. What possible reason could she have? An ambassador spoke next. Her name was Harmony in Stillwater, and her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. They were a peaceful species, known for their philosophy and their art. They saw meaning in everything. Perhaps it is a religious ritual, she suggested. Humans have been known to assign spiritual significance to acts of sacrifice. They worship deities who demand offerings of food and devotion. Perhaps this human believes she is serving a higher purpose. Commander shook his gray head. He had traveled for 2 days to present this footage in person, and he had spent every hour of that journey trying to understand what he had witnessed. "I do not believe so," he said. "I have studied the footage extensively. The human is not performing any ritual. There are no prayers, no sacred objects, no ceremonial behavior. She is simply caring for the cubs because they need care. That is all." The chamber fell silent. A general, a massive creature covered in thick fur and muscle, leaned forward in his seat. There were warriors bred for combat, respected throughout the galaxy for their strength and their courage. "Then she is a fool," he rumbled. "A warrior does not waste resources on the weak. A warrior does not protect that which cannot protect itself. This human will die, and her death will accomplish nothing." "Perhaps," replied, "but I am not certain that matters to her." Admiral raised one of her 4 hands, calling for silence. She was a species known for their strategic minds and their four-eyed vision that could see in multiple spectrums. She had led fleets into battle and won victories that lesser commanders would have thought impossible. But this footage troubled her in ways she could not explain. "Commander," she said, "you are telling me that this human, alone, hunted, outnumbered with no hope of rescue, chose to spend her final hours nurturing creatures that every survival instinct should tell her to avoid." "Yes, Admiral." "And she has been doing this for how long?" "At least 4 days based on my observations, possibly longer." 4 days. Turned back to the screen. The footage showed the human asleep now, slumped against a broken wall with 3 Ravager cubs curled around her body. Their scales, once dull and lifeless, were beginning to glow with faint colors. Blues and greens pulsed gently in the darkness. "She is healing them," said softly. "Not just feeding them, healing them." The delegate made a sound of disgust. "Healing predators, wasting resources on creatures that will grow up to kill. This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior that makes humans such unreliable allies." Unreliable, felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he had not experienced in years. This human has held that position for 4 days against constant drone attacks. She has built a defensive perimeter from scrap and salvage. She has shot down more drones in 1 week than some of our patrol ships destroy in a month. She is not unreliable. She is remarkable. "She is going to die," the general said flatly. "Remarkable or not, she is one human on a planet controlled by the enemy. There is nothing we can do." Looked at him, "Is there not?" The general frowned. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. Prime is deep in territory. Any rescue mission would require a full military escort. The resources required would be enormous. And for what? 1 soldier." "1 soldier," repeated, "and 3 Ravager cubs. Category 7 predators," they said. "Creatures that will grow up to be unstoppable killing machines. Are we supposed to rescue them too?" Turned back to the footage. She watched the human stir in her sleep, one hand moving to rest on the largest cub's head. The cub pressed closer to her, making a soft sound that might have been contentment. "Yes," said, "we are." The chamber erupted in protest. The delegate clicked furiously. The general slammed his fist on the table. Even the peaceful ambassador looked troubled, but raised her hand again, and silence returned. "Listen to me," she said, "all of you. We have been fighting this war for 3 years. We have lost worlds. We have lost fleets. We have lost soldiers beyond counting. And in all that time I have been asking myself the same question. What are we fighting for?" No one answered. "We say we are fighting for civilization," continued, "for freedom, for the right of species to live without fear of conquest. But what does that mean? What does civilization actually look like?" She pointed at the screen, at the human and her cubs. "It looks like that. A single person with nothing left to lose, choosing to help those who cannot help themselves. That is civilization. That is what we are supposed to be defending." The chamber was silent. Dispatch a rescue team to Prime, ordered. Full military escort, priority 1. The delegate sputtered. Admiral, the resources required would be enormous. They are worth it, said firmly. If we cannot save one human who represents everything we claim to believe in, then we do not deserve to win this war. She looked back at the footage one final time. The human was awake now, checking her weapons, preparing for another day of fighting. The cubs were stretching beside her, their scales bright with color. Send the ships, said. Now, rescue fleet arrived on the 7th day. Saw them first as lights in the sky, bright points moving against the orange clouds. She thought they were more drones at first. She raised her rifle and prepared to fight. But then the radio crackled to life for the first time in a week, and a voice spoke in clear Coalition standard. Survivor on the surface, this is Coalition Rescue Squadron 7. We are coming to get you. Hold your position. Lowered her weapon. She stood in the ruins of the research station, her body exhausted, her mind barely able to believe what she was hearing. Behind her, 3 Ravager cubs lifted their heads and watched the sky with curious eyes. The rescue shuttles landed in a clearing 50 meters from her position. Watched soldiers pour out, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. They moved in perfect formation, covering each other, expecting an attack. What they found instead was a single tired woman, surrounded by 3 alien predators, and a field of shattered drone wreckage that stretched as far as the eye could see. The squad leader approached carefully. He was young, maybe 22, with wide eyes that kept darting to the cubs at side. His name tag read Corporal Adam Hayes. Sergeant Cole, he asked, his voice uncertain. That is me. We are here to extract you. His eyes moved to the cubs again. The largest one had stepped forward, positioning itself between and the soldiers. Its scales glowed bright blue and green, and its body was no longer thin and starving. It looked healthy now, strong, dangerous. Stand down, said. They are not a threat. The corporal looked at her like she had lost her mind. Sergeant, those are Ravagers, Category 7 hostile fauna. Our orders are to neutralize any threats before extraction. They are not threats, repeated. They are coming with me. A tense silence fell over the clearing. The soldiers kept their weapons trained on the cubs. The cubs stayed close to, watching the strangers with wary eyes. The largest one made a low sound in its throat, a warning that could have easily become a roar. Reached down and placed her hand on its head. The cub fell silent immediately. Lower your weapons, she said. Now. The soldiers hesitated. They looked at each other, then at their corporal, then at the woman who had somehow survived alone on this planet for a week. She was thin and tired and covered in dirt and dried blood, but her eyes were steady and her voice was calm, and there was something in her expression that made them obey. Slowly, one by one, the soldiers lowered their rifles. Let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Good, now let us get off this rock. The shuttle ride was awkward. The cubs pressed against its legs, nervous in the unfamiliar environment, making soft sounds of distress every time the ship shook or rattled. The soldiers sat as far away as possible, watching the predators like they expected to be eaten at any moment. Stroked the cubs' heads and spoke to them in a gentle voice. She did not know if they understood her words, but they understood her tone. Slowly, they began to relax. When the shuttle docked with the Coalition cruiser, a crowd was waiting. Soldiers, officers, medical personnel, and representatives from half a dozen alien species had gathered to see the survivor who had held a planet against them for a week. What they saw was a small human woman walking down the loading ramp, with 3 Ravagers padding along beside her like loyal dogs. The crowd fell silent. Commander stepped forward. He had watched this woman on his screens for days. He had argued for her rescue when everyone said it was impossible. Now, seeing her in person, he felt that same strange emotion rising in his chest again. Sergeant Cole, he said, I am commander of the Survey Corps. It is an honor to meet you. Looked at him with tired eyes. You are the one who found me. I detected your life sign and dispatched a surveillance drone. I saw what you were doing. I saw you protecting the cubs. So you sent the ships. I convinced others to send them. Your actions were persuasive. Glanced down at the cubs. The largest one pressed its head against her hip, scales pulsing with warm light. She scratched behind its ears, and it made a sound that might have been purring. I did not do it to be persuasive, she said. I did it because they were hungry. Tilted his head, studying her with his large black eyes. That is exactly what Admiral said you would say. A medical team approached, wanting to examine her, wanting to take her to the infirmary, but shook her head. Not without them, she said, gesturing to the cubs. Where I go, they go. The medical officer looked horrified. Sergeant, those are Category 7 predators. We cannot allow them in the medical bay. Then I will skip the medical bay. Another tense moment passed. Then Admiral herself stepped through the crowd, her 4 eyes fixed on with an expression that might have been respect. Let her keep the animals, the Admiral said. They stay together. But Admiral, the regulations clearly state that hostile fauna must be contained and neutralized upon capture. These creatures could pose a serious danger to the crew. Looked at the cubs. They were sitting calmly at its feet, their scales bright and healthy, their eyes alert but not aggressive. They did not look like monsters. They looked like young animals who had found someone to trust. Change the regulations, said. These creatures are no longer classified as hostile. They are protected coalition assets, and Sergeant Cole is their guardian. The story of Cole spread across the galaxy like wildfire. News networks from 100 worlds broadcast the footage that had captured. They showed the human feeding starving predators while enemy drones fell ablaze behind her. They showed her holding a defensive position for 7 days with nothing but scrap technology and determination. They showed her walking off the rescue shuttle with 3 deadly creatures following her like puppies. The Dominion did not understand it. They analyzed the footage and searched for strategic meaning, for tactical advantage, for some logical reason why a human would waste resources on animals that served no purpose. They found nothing. It made no sense to them. But to the coalition, it made perfect sense. Had shown them something they had forgotten in the long years of war. Compassion was not a weakness. Caring for the helpless was not a waste. Protecting those who could not protect themselves was not foolish. It was the whole point. The cubs grew up strong and healthy on a sanctuary world, visited them whenever her duties allowed. The bond they had formed in those desperate days on Prime never faded. They remembered her, they trusted her, and she never forgot them. Years later, when the war finally ended and the galaxy began to rebuild, people still told the story of the human who fed the starving predators while her enemies burned in the sky behind her. They told it as a reminder of what they were fighting for. They told it to their children. And they never forgot.